my name is definitely not Ziska, and I've been running a ton of blighted maps recently. And you can see right over here that I've completed my endgame grind for finishing rare blighted maps, which would clock me at 75 maps, though I would more accurately state that I've ran 85 to 100 rare tier 13 plus blighted maps, a large number of which have been tier 15 or 16 corrupted maps with high quantity that with mods that I don't even look at until I'm in the map itself and without a single failure. So because I've been running these so much, I've been talking about them, pretty much nonstop, and I've been getting a lot of questions about the strategies that I'm using. How I complete the maps themselves is most frequent. What kind of build that you need to run these maps, and of course, is it profitable with the amount of money that I've been spending on these maps? And I can easily say that it is very profitable, but that is a topic for another video, and I might make that video, but for now, I'm going to be talking about the strategies I use for running these maps successfully, and that I believe that any build, any player is capable of running even some of the most awful of corrupted blighted maps with mods that directly counter how your build functions simply by relying on the towers. Now, there are some exceptions. I've opened up a map where the towers spawned extraordinarily poorly, and huge lines of blight were completely unprotected for almost the entire map. There was a line that had just a direct walk to my core that I had to stand on and protect. But outside of unique RNG situations like that, any normal map is usually completable only with towers. So let's get into that a little bit. We'll take a look at this map that I purchased. I pretty much just picked the juiciest looking map on the market with bad mods. There are definitely worse mods than this here, but this is what I could find for a fair price on short notice. So we'll go over these mods and then I'll mention some of the other mods that you want to look out for and ways to potentially deal with them and why they're so dangerous. So we'll start off with obviously the anoints here, the oils used on this map. This is really important. If you're purchasing high quant corrupted blighted maps, you really want to make sure that they have a good oil on them or that you are paying way, way less than market price. I would say, especially a regular quant 80 to 100 map without oils on it is worth very, very little. In testing those maps, I think the worst hit I had was only 9 chaos and profit, which is just a horrible waste of time compared to what you can pull out of a properly anointed and crafted map here. And even for the higher quant maps, you end up just getting a ton of the default or generic chests. And at this point in the league, you're not seeing a lot of benefit out of them. It's mostly going to be rare equipment that is completely useless for your character. It's good for the chaos recipe, and that's about it. The bladed maps themselves are completely unaffected by almost anything on the atlas. I'll get into that real quick here and show you. So none of the atlas passives or watchstones are going to affect these maps, no matter which maps they are. What does matter is your awakening bonus objective, and this 27% increased effective modifiers on non-unique maps does affect these because they are indeed not unique, and they are maps. So that's going to juice up everything, including the anointed modifiers, which is pretty awesome, and that means that putting out the extra money to get the juicier oils can sometimes be very lucrative. So if you see one of those super high quant silver anointed corrupted maps that might be going for 60 to 80 chaos, that's probably a lot more valuable than that seller is realizing. And the way these maps come to exist, and this is definitely sidetracking, but we'll go over this really, really fast, is this node right here, which basically any map that drops, any bladed maps that drop in Lyra Arthane while you have this node allocated are going to be randomly anointed. The vast majority of these maps are going to be garbage anoints. Occasionally, you'll hit, you'll just get like a few free crimsons or something like that, and that's good and fine. But the juicy ones are the ones that hit with top tier oils, and that's going to be your opalescents, your silvers, and your goldens. And the silver is probably the most important one to talk about. I can show you is that it massively increases the base quantity of items found in these maps. And that one's really interesting because combined with corrupted modifiers, you can end up with a map that has around 450% quantity in map. And while I did say that the generic chests tend to be pretty bad, it's mostly because you're not opening a ton of them. So in my testings with the silver oils, there are so many chests that you are very likely to hit a couple really juicy drops. So that's another thing to look out for there. If you see a map with just insanely inflated quantity, it means that it's been anointed with silver oils. It won't say so directly on the map itself. Unlike these, which do, directly say that the variety of items contained in 45 blight chests are lucky. Right, so moving on. The quote-unquote bad mods here are going to be 46% more monster life, and players have 60% less recovery rate of life and energy shield. These are affected by the awakened bonuses, as previously stated, and the reason that these are going to be bad is that monster life makes the monsters very tanky, and your towers may not be able to kill the monsters, or you may not be able to kill the monsters before they just mosey on past your towers and start breaking down your core. And on these high quantity corrupted maps, if anything gets to your core, you can expect it to take a lot of damage. So it's something you want to take care of very, very quickly. But we'll get more on strats like that in just a minute. There's some other map mods that I do want to mention that can be especially bad. That's going to be no regen. It's going to be... Sorry, I have a note here. Give me one. Faster mobs. The attack speed doesn't really matter, but the movement speed matters a lot. Again, this is going to be an issue where mobs are able to just run past your towers. You'll occasionally see, especially with flying mobs or immunity mobs, that they move so fast and sometimes in weird pathing that they'll ignore the majority of your crowd control towers, and you'll see mobs just sprinting towards your core. That's probably one of the only things that you need to directly intervene. And most of the time, you can just stand in front of them and body block them. Obviously, if they're going to one-shot you, that's a problem. But it is what it is. It's another one of those kind of random things that can go off and cause problems. Next up would be Ellie Resist and Monster Life. We've already gone over this. Physical reduction as well if you use Fizz Towers or are a physical-based damage type and you're unable to or unwilling to use advanced tower strategies to take care of the map for you, you could have a bit of a problem there. As far as which towers are affected, pretty much if you're using Scout strat, physical is going to be really bad for you, and if you are using any other strat, elemental is going to be the more dangerous of the two. Avoid elemental ailments, even though it's not going to be at 100% at this level. It's going to be high in the 90s, and most important thing there is going to be the freeze. Your towers are not going to effectively be able to freeze enemies if you're using either the Chill Tower Anoint or the Freeze Bolt Tower. They're going to be pretty much useless. In maps with avoid elemental ailments, you want to rely more on your physical stunning towers, using minion towers as body blockers, and glacial towers also work really well to put the physical glacial wall around the mobs, which will still stop them because it is not an elemental effect. Monsters cannot be slowed also falls in with these above. That one's really bad. The chill towers don't work on them whatsoever. None of the slowing towers work on them whatsoever. For those, again, the best strat is to try to use the glacials to freeze them, physicals to stun them if they are not stun immune, and kill them as quickly as possible. Cannot be stunned is probably the last one you really want to look out for, and that's going to make your physical towers entirely useless unless you go with a tier 4. My suggestion on cannot be stunned is to just not go with physical towers unless you are swimming in points. So the question that comes up the most when people see me doing these maps is, why am I not using any scout towers? Everybody says scout towers are the best, and if you look up videos, you'll primarily see people recommending that you use scout towers as your primary strategy. And I do think scout towers are a really good and really effective strategy, but that was a strategy that was formulated a long time ago when blighted maps were a lot different. And one of the reasons why, let's see, I can't remember even which oil it was that you use. There we go. So it was very popular to use these amber oils. This would make your buildings cost less, so you could just put out like a tremendous amount of scout towers and take a small hit in the amount of loot that you were getting. I think this is just bad. I would not recommend taking this whatsoever unless, for whatever reason, you cannot complete maps without this modifier. I would avoid taking it. It just doesn't juice these up anymore at all, and we're looking for things that are going to multiply off of the high amount of quant that we're running. And I don't think I mentioned this before, the quantity on these maps is applied to blighted maps at 20% value. What that really means is how many chests are going to spawn. So in those incredibly high quant silver chests that I was discussing before, I've seen upward clusters of like 12 to 13 chests, whereas your normal juice maps, you might see like 6 to 8 at best, which is still really good. But that's why we're juicing these maps. Right. So now with all of these additional modifiers, that this is a new change that the 20% value is affecting the chest. It used to only affect the primary loot explosion at the core at the end of each map, and that this was changed, I believe, last league. So it is way more profitable to juice these up as much as possible. And I don't think spamming scouts really just holds up, especially with some of the really bad mods. They'd be adjusting your strats on a map-to-map basis, and I'd rather just use one flexible strat than 4 or 5 more rigid strats and potentially misread a map and make a mistake, start putting down scout towers, and it turns out that scouts aren't effective in that map. It just, I don't want to fail. Failing is too expensive, and you don't get any of that juicy loot at the end. So here we are. Instead, I prefer to use more safe strats that revolve around protecting the core itself by stopping as many monsters as possible and getting them nice and grouped up, and then killing them with large AoE damage over time. So the way we're going to do that is I run this anoint. Your chilling towers freeze enemies for 0.2 seconds while they are affected by chilling beams. And what this doesn't do exactly what it looks like they do. These chilling beams are more of a debuff. As long as the chilling beam is connected to the mob, it's just ticking probably every server tick, which means that 0.2 seconds is being refreshed much, much faster than 0.2 seconds once your towers are powered up. So I believe a level 3 chill tower with a level 3 empowering tower in range is able to keep 22 mobs frozen at one time. Now, the downside of this anoint is that it adds a failure clause to the frost towers, where normally a frost tower, when a monster is no longer in range as it slowly walks by, the beams will then retarget the nearest enemy, therefore slowing most, if not all, mobs down some, which would slow down the trickle of mobs to your core. With this anoint, your towers now stop the mobs entirely, which means once it's hit 22, it's not going to be freezing the new mobs that come in if those mobs are not removed. They have to be killed. If they're not killed, then the mobs will just start walking right past, potentially into your core, and losing you the map. That's really the only drawback here. Other than that, I would say this is probably one of, if not the most powerful anoints you can put on one of your rings. It does cost, I believe, 1 silver and 1 opalescent, so it's one of the more expensive ones, but it's a small investment for what I believe is, it turns off mobs for the vast majority of maps that you're going to be running. Now, like I mentioned before, this is affected by monsters cannot be slowed or stopped. Monsters avoid elemental ailments, because freeze is an elemental ailment. I believe the chilling does seem to still apply at least most of the time, but you'll rarely, if ever, see the freezes actually hit. And because it is for such a short application, they'll be frozen for 0.2 seconds and usually, get away before it's able to refresh. So we don't like that, and we'll flex in other towers when we see that mod. And the other anoint I run is your Meteor towers create burn and ground for 3 seconds on hit. This is a lot more powerful than it looks like, and I'll admit that I overlooked it for a really long time. This league, I've been trying out a bunch of different anoints. This one's really cheap. I had a new ring and threw it on there because I hadn't really ever had much luck or enjoyed using the Meteor towers, and I have to say, like, this anoint is absolutely ridiculous. I believe this also, and a similar strat to what I'm using, was brought up in a Reddit thread a couple of weeks ago as well. So if you can find that, there might be some good information and maybe even better strats than I'm using in there. The synergy here is pretty amazing, though. As long as your Meteor towers and Frost towers are within range of one another, Meteor towers have a very large range compared to most other towers, damage towers. The monsters will group up, the meteors will hit them. The meteors themselves still do their full meteor damage, so they're incredibly strong for taking out bosses, which is what meteor towers are normally used for, is their single target damage, but that burning ground that it leaves is very potent. The damage over time will liquefy even some really tanky monsters. It'll do decent damage to bosses, and interestingly enough, it seems to still do just as much damage to the fire mobs, because while the fire mobs, I don't believe, get targeted by the meteor tower, the actual effect of the meteor tower burning ground does not count, and it still works on them for some reason, and they die. So this also removes the immunity issue that can come up with some other strategies. As far as other strategies or other anoints that you can use, I've heard really successful things with people playing with empowering rings, especially going with the increased area of effect, I believe, which I guess it would let you build what I would call like a super cluster more effectively. You can cover hopefully multiple lanes with much fewer empowering towers, so I could see how it can be really good. Something I'm interested in trying out at some point. I'm just not really sure what towers would pair with it the best. Probably I would still go with the Chilling Towers freeze and just rely on using multiple different damage towers at that point, rather than a more focused strat. So since I already do that, I guess the strat really wouldn't change. It is what it is. Their scout strat, which I don't really want to get into. There's so many videos on it. The TLDR is you usually anoint a combination of scout tower damage with scout tower range. Some people tend to prefer one or the other. Doubling up on range does give them, they can hit from probably further away than any other tower, which is very nice. And the overall strat is that they're all single target and they attack very rapidly, and again they have huge range, so they're able to whittle down all of the small mobs very quickly, leaving only the bosses, where you will have a ton of scouts and all of the scouts will converge their damage on the single boss and you win. Scout strats, as I said earlier, do tend to have issues when the monsters are not being crowd controlled in any way and are just really juiced up and too fast. They tend to just sprint past everything and destroy the tower. If you got lucky and got really good boss spawns early, so you got a ton of early points to spend, then you could shift into the scout strat instead of going with the normal strat pretty early. If you play with it and you like it and it's successful, let me know. I'm interested in trying a couple different strats. I'm going to go ahead and start this map now before this video gets any longer. I think we're already about 20 minutes, so we are 10 minutes over my intended length for the introduction to this video. So let's get going. Let me put on an actual weapon here. I did want to touch on real fast. So this is my primary weapon. It has spectral spirits, which are always out, which do help quite a bit. So I'm switching to my other staff, and I intend to only use this to save the map if things go catastrophically. If we get really bad rolls, we'll find out. So we'll kick this off, and usually I use this time. A lot of times I don't even look at the maps before I run them. So I'll check out all of our mods. As soon as I'm happy, I'll go ahead and kick things off. And we're going to go with like the safest strats possible. See what kind of towers or what kind of gateways we have out here. Put them down at all. Alright. So early on, it's a really good idea to kind of blueprint your towers. But you can also expect that you're probably going to have to cover 3 or 4 different entryways into your tower, and these are going to start popping up really quickly. I suggest putting at least one meteor tower very close to the core. And in fact, in this situation, I probably normally wouldn't have gone with a meteor so early, but I do tend to autopilot sometimes, and it is what it is. So here we are with an early meteor tower, which is fine. And the reason that you don't want to jump to meteor like instantly, and you can see here that they're just not getting stunned. Stun tower is like actually pretty crazy though, and can help out tremendously, but just a couple of low-level freezes here are going to go a long way. And yeah, you can see I kind of screwed myself over a little bit by building the way I did, but who cares? We should be fine. So let's think these guys frozen and slowed and stunned. Now the chilling and physical towers do actually do damage, and it is a non-negligible amount of damage. And they can carry quite a bit, especially when they have, like, yeah, you can see a big pile there was slowly trickling down. They're holding up decently here. That's going to be a problem. But yeah, see they're frozen. It's safe. Alright, so you get the primary strat here. Let's actually try to not fail at this point. It's getting really dicey. So we'll upgrade those. Hopefully those guys don't take us out. We got another frost tower over here. Get that one up to 3. At this point, like, once you have 3 lanes coming in, you're going to be getting like a pretty good influx of points. You do want to keep an eye on it and not get stupid about how quickly you're building, especially non-essential towers. And also worth noting that the level 3 fire towers are actually really good on their own. And that's why it was a bad idea for me to upgrade the Meteor so early in a map where I'm trying not to do any damage myself. The smites that you saw me do earlier actually don't do any damage at all, by the way. Just kind of an instinct, and the buff does not affect towers, including scouts. Auras do not affect scouts or buff them in any way. So you can already see here that like we're pretty much set, and we have very little damage going out. We will eventually get overwhelmed as these frost towers back up, which is why we have two of them here. But as we just upgraded to a medium, our Meteor, that'll start clearing out everything in this radius. I highly suggest keeping an eye on your mini map, either in the corner or whichever works better, whichever is easier for your eyes, just to keep an eye on where mobs are coming from and look for additional pathing. I can honestly say, so this is a little silly because this tower or this map has ended up being very, very easy in the way that the lanes have shown up. And I didn't see when it happened, so you can see now I basically have way too many points, and once this happens, you have won the map. And you just want to go crazy with building wherever you're seeing like huge influxes of mobs. And there's a few different towers that you can use to cover different, gaps or weaknesses. Arc towers are really good at clearing out mobs in these long chains. You can see as they'll just take out a whole line real quick. The tier 4 lightning storm towers are okay. I believe the way they work is it might actually do some sort of like AoE shotgunning where I believe the lightning bolts do a small like AoE explosion, and that can hit a lot of mobs. So when everything is grouped up really tightly, it can do a lot of damage. One of the anoints increases the size of that AoE, which, I don't know, could potentially get like really ridiculous. Another anoint makes it target monsters instead of targeting the tower itself. Usually they work like these physical towers where it's just a circle that's affected around them. And with that anoint, it could potentially, if you built one over here-ish, it could shoot over and affect all the mobs over here. Something I kind of wanted to play around with, but I tried building some like tier 4 lightning storm towers, and I don't know, they're okay, but it's spending a lot of resources for, what's not a ton of effect. And you can see we've already completed this map, like we basically slept through it. So I don't know, maybe I'll make another video or a couple of videos of me running through a whole bunch of these, or a handful of like really bad corrupted maps, to hopefully show how they can be harder. And once the timer goes up and the core is mostly safe, you will need to run out and like find these guys that just like decided not to participate in the map. But that's it. That was the whole map. And I can honestly say like most maps go like this. It's probably maybe 1 in 5 with really bad mods that can get a little bit spicy, and it's usually entirely based on the layout. We only had 3 lanes coming in here, and 2 of them were able to be covered by one cluster of towers. There's some maps where you'll see even 4 or 5 connections come in, and usually the most dangerous is when you have 4 really good defensive lanes covered, and the vines, or whatever, the mycelium will find the one thin line that is not covered by your towers, and it's actually really hard to notice it, and they'll just come running into your tower. So sometimes you do have to interfere there. But that's it. So if you made it this long, I believe we're at about 30 minutes here. Thank you for watching, and leave your comments or questions below, and yeah, I might be following up with another one of these videos on map strategies or blighted map strategies pretty soon. Thanks very much, and good luck.